The alarm screamed across the bridge of the harmonious judgment. Inquisitor Thelxara's forearms moved quickly over her control panels, her golden eyes narrowing as the impossible data appeared on her screens. A ship inside the Kalar exclusion zone. No one entered the forbidden zones, not in 12,000 years. Not ever. Identify the vessel, she commanded, her voice sharp. Her junior officer, a young Malthari with nervous tentacles, worked his station with trembling movements. Inquisitor, the signature is human. Thelxara felt her blood run cold. Humans. Of course it was humans. 73 years since they joined the Galactic Concordat, and they still acted like children playing with weapons they did not understand. She had voted against their membership. She had warned the High Council that these strange primates from the edge of the galaxy were too reckless, too curious, too dangerously unpredictable. Open a channel, she ordered. Full authority codes. The view screen flickered to life. A human woman appeared, wearing the dark blue uniform of Earth's deep space fleet. She had brown skin, black hair pulled back tightly, and eyes that showed no fear. The name strip on her uniform read, Captain Elena Vasquez. Human vessel, this is Inquisitor Thelxara of the Concordat Enforcement Division. You are in violation of Concordat Law, Section 1, Article Absolute. Exit the exclusion zone immediately or you will be destroyed. Captain Vasquez looked at her calmly. Too calmly. Inquisitor, we cannot comply. We've made a discovery that the Concordat needs to see. There are no discoveries in the forbidden zones, Thelxara said, her voice hard. Only death. The architects sealed these regions for reasons beyond our understanding. Leave now. This is your final warning. The architects didn't seal this region, Vasquez replied. Someone else did. Someone who didn't want us to find what's here. Thelxara's hands tightened on her command chair. You know nothing of the architects. You are a young species barely able to travel between stars. Do not speak of matters that... The alarm screamed again. Louder this time. Thelxara's screens filled with red warnings. All around them, the space itself was changing. Ancient mechanisms sleeping for thousands of years were waking up. What have you done? Thelxara shouted at the screen. Vasquez's face showed genuine concern now. We didn't do anything. The defense grid activated when your ship entered weapons range. Inquisitor, if you want to survive the next 10 minutes, I suggest we work together. Thelxara watched her screens in horror. Massive structures were rising from the dead planets around them. Energy readings climbed to impossible levels. The weapons of the architects designed to destroy entire fleets were powering up, and both ships were trapped inside their range. She had two choices. Destroy the human ship and die alone, or trust these reckless newcomers and maybe, just maybe, survive. What do you propose? She asked through clenched teeth. Our scientist, Dr. Chen, has been studying the architect systems. He thinks he can deactivate the grid, but we need time. Can your ship handle the defensive fire while we work? Thelxara laughed bitterly. The Harmonious Judgment was one of the Concordat's finest warships, built by the Zenthari Empire over 50 years. But against architect weapons? We can try. But if you betray us, we won't, Vasquez interrupted. We're all dead if we don't cooperate. The first energy beam cut through space where the Harmonious Judgment had been seconds before. Thelxara threw her ship into evasive maneuvers that pushed her crew against their restraints. Another beam. Another. The architect weapons fired with terrifying precision, predicting their movements, learning from each dodge. On the human ship, Dr. James Chen stared at his screens with the intensity of a man possessed. His fingers flew over the alien interface they had discovered on the surface of the third planet. The architect language was unlike anything in the Concordat databases. It had taken him 3 weeks just to decode the basic grammar. But he had found something. Something that made his hands shake when he realized what it meant. Captain, he said quietly, I'm into their primary archive. Vasquez stood behind him. One hand braced against the wall as the ship shook from nearby explosions. Can you shut down the defense grid? Yes, but Captain, you need to see what's in here. The architects didn't just disappear. The ship lurched violently. Vasquez grabbed Chen's chair to keep from falling. Later, Doctor. Right now I need those guns offline. Chen nodded and returned to his work. His fingers moved through the architect systems, following pathways of code that were ancient when humanity still lived in caves. The defense grid was connected to everything, woven through the facility like nerves through a body. But there was a shutdown sequence. The architects had built safety measures into their weapons, They had never wanted to kill indiscriminately. Found it, Chen whispered. He pressed the final sequence. In space, the weapons powered down. The massive structures sank back into the dead planets. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the sound of damaged systems and heavy breathing. Thelgzara slumped in her chair, her forearms trembling from the strain of the last 10 minutes. Her ship had taken hits. Minor damage, but against architect weapons, any damage was a miracle to survive. "Human ship," she said quietly. "You have our gratitude. Now I must insist that you—" "Inquisitor, please listen," Vasquez interrupted. "Dr. Chen has translated parts of the architect archive. You need to hear what he found. Captain Vasquez, my orders are clear. This region is forbidden. Whatever you found, it must remain sealed. The Concordate's founding was built on a lie," Vasquez said, her voice cutting like a blade. "The architects didn't disappear. They were murdered. By your founding species. By the Zenthari, the Quorum, the Hive Mothers, the Eternal Court, and the Silicon Collective. 12,000 years ago, they formed an alliance and committed genocide against the galaxy's greatest civilization." Thelgzara felt the world spin around her. That cannot be true. The Great Ascension was when the first species joined together in harmony, creating the Concordate to preserve peace and to preserve their power. Dr. Chen's voice came through the channel now. He looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with conviction. "I have their records, Inquisitor. Battle plans. Casualty reports. Celebration messages after the final architect stronghold fell. The founding species of your Concordate were terrified of the architects, not because the architects threatened them, but because the architects were uplifting younger species, giving them knowledge, power. The old empires saw themselves being replaced by new civilizations that didn't respect their ancient claims to dominance." "Show me," Thelgzara demanded. The data streamed across her screens. Zenthari military codes, 12,000 years old but unmistakable. Plans for orbital bombardment. Biological weapons. The systematic destruction of every architect world. And worse, orders to erase all evidence, to create the forbidden zones, to ensure that no one would ever know the truth. Thelgzara read the name at the bottom of one order. Supreme Commander Thelkezor. Her ancestor. Her family's greatest hero. The military genius who had saved the Zenthari Empire during the time of chaos. She felt sick. "This changes nothing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Ancient history cannot—" "It changes everything," Vasquez said softly. "Because if the Concordate was founded on murder and lies, what does that make every law you enforce? Every world you govern? Every species you keep in check?" Thelgzara had no answer. Behind them, deeper in the exclusion zone, the architect facility hummed with power. It had waited 12,000 years for someone to find it. For someone to learn its secrets. For someone brave or foolish enough to ask the questions that everyone else was afraid to answer. The humans had asked. And now nothing would ever be the same. The silence on the bridge of the harmonious judgment lasted for exactly 47 seconds. Then Thelgzara's communication officer spoke, his voice shaking. "Inquisitor, we are receiving emergency transmissions from Concordate High Command. They are demanding our immediate report on the situation in the exclusion zone." Thelgzara stared at the architect data still glowing on her screens. 12,000 years of lies. Her entire civilization built on the graves of the galaxy's most advanced species. She thought of her training, her oaths, her duty to the Zenthari Empire and the Concordate it helped create. "Tell them we are investigating an unauthorized incursion, and will report when we have full information," she said slowly. Her second officer, a veteran warrior named Kethron, turned to her with surprise. "Inquisitor, regulations require immediate—" "I know what regulations require," Thelgzara snapped. "I also know that something is very wrong here, and I will not file a report until I understand what we are dealing with." She opened the channel to the human ship again. Captain Vasquez appeared, looking tired but alert. Behind her, Thelgzara could see the human crew working at their stations. So few of them. Human ships carried barely a tenth of the crew of equivalent Concordate vessels. They relied on automation and individual skill rather than overwhelming numbers. It was considered primitive by Concordate standards. "Captain Vasquez, I need to see this architect facility myself. Will you permit me to transport to your ship?" Vasquez nodded. "Of course. We'll take a shuttle down to the surface together. But Inquisitor, before we go, you should know that this conversation is being monitored. High Command is listening to everything we say. Thelzara's blood chilled. How do you know this? A thin human male appeared on the screen next to Vasquez. He wore glasses, a strange human affectation when eye repair was simple. This must be Dr. Chen, because they activated a scanning protocol on your ship 3 minutes ago, Chen explained. It's hidden in your standard communication systems. Very clever, actually. The Concordat has been monitoring all enforcement vessels for decades, maybe longer. We only noticed because our systems don't have the same backdoors built in. Thelxara felt betrayed. She had served the Concordat for 30 years. She had enforced their laws across 100 worlds, and all that time they had been watching her, listening to her private communications, treating her like a potential enemy rather than a loyal servant. Can you block it? She asked. Chen smiled. It was not a nice smile. Already done. As far as High Command knows, your communication systems were damaged during the fight with the defense grid. You're running on backup, which conveniently doesn't have their spyware. You're welcome. 2 hours later, Thelxara stood on the surface of a dead world, looking up at a structure that should not exist. The Architect facility rose from the ground like a crystal mountain, its walls made of materials that her scanner could not identify. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Captain Vasquez stood beside her, wearing a human environment suit that looked fragile compared to Zenthari armor. Dr. Chen led them forward, walking with the confidence of someone who had been here many times before. The facility is mostly underground, Chen explained as they approached. What you see here is just the entrance. Below there are archives, laboratories, and manufacturing centers. The architects built this place as a refuge, we think, somewhere to hide their knowledge if they were ever threatened. They knew, Thelxara said quietly. They knew what was coming. Yes, Chen replied. The records show they received warnings from sympathetic individuals within the conspiracy. They had time to prepare, but not time to save themselves. They chose to save their knowledge instead. They entered the facility through a door that opened at their approach, recognizing them as living beings worthy of entry. Inside, the walls glowed with soft light. The air was clean and fresh, maintained by systems that had run without failure for 12 millennia. Chen led them deeper, through corridors that twisted and turned in patterns that hurt Thelxara's eyes. Architect architecture followed mathematical principles that other species found difficult to perceive. Finally, they reached a large chamber filled with what looked like crystals growing from the floor and ceiling. This is the main archive, Chen said. Each crystal contains more information than every computer in the Concordat combined. I've barely scratched the surface in 3 weeks. He approached one crystal and placed his hand on it. The crystal responded, and suddenly the air filled with images. Thelxara watched in horror as the genocide unfolded before her eyes. Architect worlds burning, ships torn apart, billions dying, and through it all the symbols of the 5 founding species working together with brutal efficiency. Why? Thelxara asked, her voice breaking. The architects were peaceful. They helped younger species. Why would anyone want to destroy them? Vasquez answered, her voice hard. Because the architects believed in equality. They uplifted species based on merit, not politics. They shared knowledge freely. And that threatened the old empires. The Zenthari, the Quorum, the others. They had built their power on controlling access to advanced technology. The architects were making that control irrelevant. So they killed them all, Thelxara whispered, and then created the Concordat to ensure no one would ever challenge their power again. The forbidden zones aren't to protect us from architect weapons. They're to prevent us from learning the truth. Now you understand, Chen said, and now you need to make a choice. Will you help us bring this truth to the galaxy, or will you try to bury it like your ancestors did? Thelxara looked at the images still playing in the air. She thought of her oaths, her duty, her loyalty. Then she thought of her children, growing up in a civilization built on lies and murder. I will help you, she said, but you must understand, the Concordat will not allow this information to spread. They will send ships, many ships. They will destroy this facility, your ship, my ship, and everyone who knows the truth. Let them try, Vasquez said with a fierce smile. We've downloaded copies of the entire archive, multiple backups hidden in systems across human space. If they want to stop the truth, they'll have to destroy Earth itself. Kethron's voice crackled over their communication channel. Inquisitor, we are detecting ships entering the exclusion zone, multiple contacts. It appears to be a Concordat battle fleet. Thelxara's heart sank. How many? At least 40 warships, Inquisitor. They are broadcasting on all frequencies, ordering us to stand down and prepare to be boarded. Vasquez looked at Chen. How long do you need to finish the download? At least 2 more hours, Chen replied. The archive is vast, and we're still decoding the compression algorithms. We don't have 2 hours, Thelxara said. She activated her communicator. Kathron, prepare the ship for immediate departure. Activate all weapon systems. Inquisitor, we cannot fight a battle fleet. Even with the human ship, we are outnumbered 40-2. We're not going to fight them, Thelxara said. We're going to run, and we're going to give Dr. Chen every second we can. Back on the surface, they ran for the shuttles. Vasquez grabbed Chen's arm as he tried to stay behind. Doctor, we need you alive more than we need a complete archive. But there's so much more, Chen protested. Information about other architect facilities, about technologies they developed, about species they uplifted who might still be out there somewhere. We'll come back, Vasquez said firmly. Right now we run. The shuttles lifted off as energy beams started to fall from orbit. The Concordat fleet wasn't bothering with warnings anymore. They were trying to destroy the facility and everyone near it. On the Harmonious Judgment, Thelxara took command with cold efficiency. Helm, plot a course deeper into the exclusion zone. Maximum speed. Inquisitor, heading deeper is suicide. The defense grids are inactive as long as we don't threaten the facilities, Thelxara said. The Concordat fleet doesn't know that. They'll be cautious, afraid of triggering the same response that nearly destroyed us. It will buy us time. The Prometheus Unbound and the Harmonious Judgment raced away from the Architect facility as it disappeared in a storm of weapons fire. Behind them, the Concordat fleet followed, but carefully, watching for the deadly automated defenses. In her quarters, Thelxara activated her personal communicator, using an old emergency frequency that few people remembered. She began transmitting the Architect records, sending them to contacts she trusted, to news networks, to academic institutions, to anyone who might listen. If she was going to die for the truth, she would make sure the truth survived her. In space, the chase had begun, and across the galaxy, the first messages were arriving, carrying information that would shake civilization to its core. The Prometheus Unbound dove between 2 massive asteroids, its engines screaming at maximum output. Behind it, 3 Concordat destroyers followed, firing continuously. Energy beams cut through space, missing by meters as Captain Vasquez threw her ship through maneuvers that would have killed a crew without inertial dampeners. They're gaining, her tactical officer reported. I can see that, Vasquez replied calmly. She studied her displays, looking for an advantage. The Concordat ships were faster, more heavily armed, and built by civilizations that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Her ship was barely a century old, built by a species that still considered Mars a frontier. But Concordat ships were also predictable. They followed doctrine. They relied on overwhelming force and superior technology. They expected their enemies to run in straight lines and beg for mercy. Humans didn't do either of those things. Take us into that debris field, Vasquez ordered, pointing at a region of space filled with the remnants of old architect structures. Maximum speed. Her helmsman, a young woman named Sarah Park, looked at her with wide eyes. Captain, the navigation computers can't plot a safe course through that. The debris is too dense. Then turn off the navigation computers and fly manually, Vasquez said. Park swallowed hard, then nodded. Her hands moved to the manual controls, devices that most modern ships didn't even include anymore. She had trained on atmospheric flight simulators back on Earth, threading aircraft through canyons and cities. This was the same thing, just faster, and in space, with people shooting at her. She took a deep breath and dove into the debris field. The Concordat destroyers slowed, their captains uncertain. The debris field was dangerous, filled with chunks of metal and crystal that could tear through shields. Following the humans in there was risky. Then their commander received new orders from the fleet admiral. Destroy the human ship, no matter the cost. The 3 destroyers entered the field. Park flew like her ship was part of her body, spinning through gaps that looked too small, diving under obstacles that appeared without warning, climbing over fields of razor-sharp fragments. Behind them, the first Concordat destroyer clipped a piece of debris and lost shields. The second followed too closely and collided with the first. Both ships tumbled away, damaged and out of the fight. The third destroyer was better. Its captain was skilled, experienced, and angry. He followed the human ship through every twist and turn, closing the distance. "He's good," Park said through gritted teeth. "Then be better," Vasquez replied. On the harmonious judgment, Thelzara watched the pursuit with professional appreciation and personal horror. The human pilot was insane. No Concordate captain would risk their ship like that. But the insanity was working. The humans had disabled 2 destroyers and were leading the third on a chase that was destroying its forward shields against the debris. "Inquisitor, we could assist them," Kethron suggested. "One shot from our main weapons would destroy that destroyer and reveal our position to the rest of the fleet," Thelzara replied. "No, we wait. The humans have a plan, I think," she hoped. On the Prometheus Unbound, Dr. Chen worked frantically at his station. He had been analyzing the Architect facility's defenses while they ran, looking for something, anything that could help them. "Captain, I found something," he said suddenly. The Architects had a gateway network, a way to travel instantly between facilities. "I think I can activate one." Vasquez turned to him. "You think?" "The controls are partially damaged, and I've only translated about 60% of the operating instructions," Chen admitted. "But the alternative is fighting a battle fleet with 2 ships. I'll take uncertain technology over certain death. Where would the gateway take us?" "I don't know," Chen said. "The destination codes are in a format I can't decode yet. But it would get us out of here." Vasquez made her decision in seconds. That was another thing about humans that frustrated other species. They could evaluate impossible situations and commit to action, while others were still analyzing the probabilities. "Do it," she ordered. "Helm, once the gateway opens, take us through at maximum speed. Don't slow down, don't hesitate." "Yes, Captain," Park replied. The pursuing destroyer was close now, close enough that its weapons were hitting. The Prometheus Unbound shields flickered and sparked. One more good hit and they would fail. Chen's fingers flew over his controls, entering commands in a language that humanity had never spoken. The Architect systems responded sluggishly, as if waking from a very long sleep. Then, ahead of them, space began to tear. A circle of light appeared, growing rapidly. It was beautiful and terrible, reality itself being folded and manipulated by technology beyond human understanding. "Gateway opening," Chen reported. "Destination unknown. Stability uncertain." "Good enough," Vasquez said. "Helm, take us in." Park didn't hesitate. She aimed the Prometheus Unbound directly at the gateway and pushed the engines to emergency power. The ship accelerated, shooting through the debris field with centimeters to spare on all sides. The Concordate destroyer followed, its captain refusing to let the humans escape. Behind them, Thelzara made her decision. "All power to engines. Follow the humans through the gateway." "Inquisitor, we don't know where it leads," Kethron protested. "I know," Thelzara said calmly. "Follow them anyway." The Prometheus Unbound hit the gateway at full speed. For a moment that felt like forever, they were nowhere and everywhere, traveling through a space that existed outside of normal physics. Vasquez saw colors that didn't exist, felt her body stretch and compress simultaneously, heard sounds that reality shouldn't allow. Then they were through. They emerged in a new system, one with a bright yellow star and several planets. Park frantically checked their position, trying to determine where they were. "Captain, according to the star charts." "This is impossible. Where are we?" Vasquez demanded. "We're in the Zenthari home system," Park said in disbelief. "We're 1 million kilometers from the Zenthari homeworld, right in the heart of Concordate space." Behind them, the gateway still glowed. The harmonious judgment came through, its engines flaring as it tried to slow down. And behind it, moving at attack speed, came the Concordate destroyer. The destroyer emerged directly into the defense perimeter of the most heavily fortified world in the galaxy. Automated systems, not knowing it was a Concordate ship, opened fire. The destroyer's shields, already weakened from the chase, collapsed in seconds. The ship broke apart in a ball of fire. Thelzara stared at the homeworld of her species on her view screen. She had not been home in 15 years. She had never expected to return like this, fleeing from her own people, branded a traitor for choosing truth over loyalty. "This is Zenthari Defense Command to unidentified vessels." A voice came over their communicators. "You have entered restricted space. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded or you will be destroyed." Vasquez opened a channel on all frequencies, broadcasting to every ship, every station, every communication device in the system. When she spoke, her words were transmitted to billions of Zenthari and recorded for history. People of Zenthar, I am Captain Elena Vasquez of the human vessel Prometheus Unbound. I come to you with a message that your leaders do not want you to hear. 12,000 years ago, your ancestors committed genocide. They murdered the architects, the greatest civilization the galaxy has ever known. They murdered them not because the architects threatened you, but because the architects believed in equality and freedom. Your Concordat was built on lies and blood. I have proof. I have their records, their battle plans, their celebration messages. I have the truth. She nodded to Chen, who began broadcasting the architect files across every channel. Images of the genocide, of Zenthari ships firing on peaceful worlds, of orders signed by ancient heroes whose statues still stood in every major city. Your leaders will try to silence me, Vasquez continued. They will call me a liar, a troublemaker, a threat to galactic peace. But I ask you this, if I am lying, why are they so desperate to stop you from hearing what I have to say? If the Concordat is built on truth and justice, why are there forbidden zones where questions are answered with death? Why do they monitor your communications, control your information, and tell you that some knowledge is too dangerous to know? On the Zenthari homeworld, billions watched and listened. In government buildings, officials panicked. In military headquarters, generals demanded action. In homes and workplaces, ordinary people saw the images and began to ask questions. On the harmonious judgment, Thelxara opened her own channel. I am Inquisitor Thelxara, loyal servant of the Zenthari Empire for 30 years. I have seen the architect records. I have verified their authenticity. Captain Vasquez speaks the truth. Our civilization is built on a lie. The question now is, what will we do about it? In space around them, hundreds of Zenthari warships began to move, taking positions around the two small vessels. Vasquez knew they could not fight. They could barely run. But they had done what they came to do. The truth was out. And across the galaxy, everything was beginning to change. The Concordat High Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The council chamber was built to inspire awe, a massive sphere floating in space above the capital world. Representatives from all 47 member species sat in their designated positions, but today everyone's attention focused on the 5 seats at the center. The founders, the Zenthari, the Quorum, the Hive Mothers, the Eternal Court, and the Silicon Collective. High Speaker Vorash of the Zenthari stood to address the assembly. He was old, even by Zenthari standards, his forearms showing the tremors of age, but his voice was still strong. The human claims are fabrications, he announced. Clever forgeries designed to destabilize the Concordat. We must respond with unity and strength. The humans must be expelled from the Concordat, and their homeworld placed under observation. In the gallery reserved for junior species, the human ambassador stood. Her name was Ambassador Jennifer Martinez, and she had spent 20 years building relationships across the galaxy. Now she threw away all that careful diplomacy. You're lying, she said clearly, and everyone in this chamber knows it. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. No one spoke to the founders like that. Martinez continued, raising her voice. We have experts from 30 different species who have examined the architect records. Linguists, historians, forensic analysts, all confirm the records are genuine. You destroyed the architects. You built the Concordat on their graves, and you've spent 12,000 years ensuring no one would discover the truth. Vorash's face darkened with anger. You overstep, human. Your species has been part of the Concordat for barely a century. You know nothing of our history, our struggles, your crimes, Martinez interrupted. Let me tell you what happens next. Every junior species in this chamber is receiving the same data we are. Right now, across the galaxy, people are learning the truth. You can expel humanity, but you can't expel everyone. The Concordat as you built it is finished. On Earth, the human government moved with the speed that made other species nervous. President Okonkwo addressed a joint session of the United Earth Assembly, flanked by the military command and the heads of the space fleet. Today, humanity faces a choice, she said. We can bow to the Concordat's demands and abandon Captain Vasquez. Or we can stand for the truth no matter the cost. I know what choice I'm making. The question is, will you stand with me? The vote was unanimous. Earth invoked Article 7 of the Concordat Charter, the article that allowed any species to challenge the High Council if they had evidence of crimes against galactic law. It had never been invoked before. The founders had never imagined it would be needed. The Concordate's legal scholars argued for 3 days about whether humans even had the right to invoke Article 7. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the social fabric of the Concordate began to tear. On the Quorum homeworlds, student protests filled the streets, young people demanding to know why their history classes had never mentioned the architects, why the forbidden zones existed, why their government was so afraid of old truths. In Hive Mother space, entire hives went silent in mourning. The Hive Mothers valued knowledge above all things. Learning that their founders had destroyed the galaxy's greatest repository of knowledge was a betrayal beyond forgiveness. The Silicon Collective's response was coldly logical. They released a statement calculating the probability that the architect records were forgeries, 0.001%. They then calculated the probability that keeping junior species ignorant would remain sustainable, 0%. The Silicon Collective announced they were withdrawing from the High Council and opening their borders to free travel and information exchange. One of the 5 founders had broken ranks. The Concordate shook. On the Prometheus Unbound, Captain Vasquez watched the chaos spread with mixed feelings. She had wanted the truth to come out, but she had not fully considered the consequences. Governments were falling. Trade routes were closing. Species that had been allies for centuries now looked at each other with suspicion and anger. Did we do the right thing? She asked. Dr. Chen Chen looked up from his work. He had been translating more of the architect archives, racing to understand as much as possible before someone finally destroyed them. We did the only thing, he said. The Concordate was built on a lie. You can't build anything lasting on a lie. Eventually it collapses. We just made it collapse faster. And how many people will die in that collapse? Chen had no answer for that. On the Harmonious Judgment, Thelgzara faced a different problem. Her crew was divided. Half supported her decision to help the humans. They saw the architect records and understood the implications. But the other half remained loyal to the Xanthari Empire and the Concordate. They believed Thelgzara had committed treason. The division came to a head when her weapons officer, a young male named Torvik, pulled a sidearm during a strategy meeting. I cannot allow this ship to continue supporting the humans, he said, his weapon aimed at Thelgzara. You have betrayed everything we stand for. Thelgzara remained calm. What do we stand for, Torvik? Truth or loyalty? They are the same thing, Torvik insisted. The Concordate is truth. It has kept peace for 12,000 years. Peace built on genocide, Kethron said quietly. He had moved to stand beside Thelgzara, his own weapon drawn. Is that the peace you want to defend? The bridge was silent. Everyone waited to see what Torvik would do. Finally, he lowered his weapon. I don't know what I believe anymore, he whispered. Then you're starting to think for yourself, Thelgzara said gently. That's all I ask. But not everyone in the Concordate was confused or conflicted. The military forces loyal to the founders regrouped and formed a massive fleet. Their orders were clear. Destroy the human ship, capture or kill Inquisitor Thelgzara, and secure the architect facilities before anyone else could access them. Fleet Admiral Kreshitar led the armada personally. He was Xanthari, from an ancient military family, and he believed with absolute certainty that the old ways were right. The Concordate had brought order to chaos. The founders had made hard choices to ensure civilization survived. If that meant destroying the architects, then the architects had been a threat. He would do his duty. He would destroy the humans and restore order. His fleet of 200 warships entered the Xanthari home system with weapons ready. The Xanthari home defense fleet moved to intercept, but found itself in an impossible position. Fire on the armada and start a civil war. Let the armada through and allow the humans to be destroyed. The home fleet's commander, Admiral Shenkara, made a choice that surprised everyone. She opened a channel to both the armada and the human ship. Captain Vasquez, the home fleet is granting you sanctuary. We will not allow Fleet Admiral Kreshitar to fire on you while you remain in Xanthari space. Kreshitar was furious. Admiral Shenkara, you are interfering with a legal military operation. Stand down immediately. Show me the legal orders, Shenkara replied calmly. Show me the High Council authorization. Show me anything that proves this operation has legitimate authority, because all I see is an armada about to start a war. She had trapped him. Kreshitar's orders had come from the founders directly, bypassing the normal chain of command. They were technically illegal. But if he admitted that, he would be admitting the founders were acting outside the law. "This is not over," Kreshitar said. He ordered his fleet to withdraw, but not far. They took up positions just outside the home system, blockading it. No one in, no one out. Captain Vasquez understood what was happening. "They're trapping us here. Eventually, the home fleet will run out of supplies or political support. Then Kreshitar moves in. So we need to change the situation before that happens," Thelgzara said over the communication channel. "Dr. Chen, can you activate more gateways?" Chen looked uncertain. "Maybe. The architects built gateways at all their major facilities. If I can activate the network, we could travel to any of them." "Do it," Vasquez ordered. "And while you work, I have a call to make." She opened a channel to Earth, knowing it would take time for the signal to reach home. When President Okonkwo answered, Vasquez spoke clearly. "Madam President, I need you to invoke the oldest law in the architect records, the one I sent you yesterday, the one about the Great Reckoning." On Earth, in the presidential office, Okonkwo looked at her advisors. They had been studying the architect laws all night, trying to understand the legal framework of a dead civilization. "Are you certain, Captain? Once we invoke that law, there's no going back." "I'm certain," Vasquez replied. "The Concordat won't change on its own. We have to force the change." Okonkwo nodded slowly. She knew Vasquez was right. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system was to tear it down and build something new. "Very well, Captain. I'll issue the challenge. God help us all." The announcement came on every channel in every language to every world in the Concordat. President Okonkwo stood before the cameras with the weight of human history on her shoulders. "By the authority granted in the Architect Legal Codes, Section 12, Article of Last Resort, I hereby invoke the Great Reckoning. The Concordat stands accused of crimes against civilization itself. The accused are the 5 founding species. The evidence is preserved in architect records. The penalty, if found guilty, is the dissolution of all current governmental structures and the reorganization of galactic society according to architect principles of justice and equality, legal." Experts across the galaxy rushed to verify the citation. What they found shocked them. The law was real. The architects had indeed created a mechanism for dealing with civilizations that committed genocide. And according to that law, any species discovering evidence of such crimes had the right to call for a complete restructuring of galactic government. The founders reacted with rage and fear. They had spent 12,000 years building the Concordat. They would not let some upstart species destroy it with ancient laws. Fleet Admiral Kreshitar received new orders. "Take the Zenthari home system by force. Destroy the humans. End this crisis with overwhelming military power." His armada moved in. 200 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. The Zenthari home defense fleet prepared to defend, but they were outnumbered 2-1. The battle would be bloody and billions of civilians were in the potential crossfire. Then Dr. Chen did something impossible. In his lab on the Prometheus Unbound, surrounded by computers running translations of architect code, Chen had finally cracked the Gateway Network's control systems. He had found something the founders never wanted anyone to discover. The architects had built gateways everywhere, not just at their own facilities. They had hidden them throughout the galaxy, in systems no one paid attention to, in regions marked as dead space, and those gateways still worked. Chen activated them all at once. Across the galaxy, in 100 different systems, circles of light appeared. Ships began to emerge. Not human ships. Not Concordat ships. Ships built with designs that were ancient when the founders were young. They were the survivors. 12,000 years ago, when the architects realized they were going to lose the war, they had done something desperate. They had opened gateways to pocket dimensions, to spaces outside normal reality, and they had sent through every species they had ever uplifted. Refugees, survivors, witnesses to the genocide who could someday tell the truth. Those species had been waiting, building, preparing, hoping that one day someone would activate the gateways and give them a chance to return. The humans had given them that chance. The ships that came through the gateways were strange and wonderful. Some were biological, grown rather than built. Others were made of pure energy, held together by force fields. Some were so advanced they barely registered on scanners, but they all had one thing in common. They remembered the architects with love, and they remembered the founders with hatred. Admiral Kreshitar stared at his tactical displays in horror. His armada of 200 ships suddenly faced a fleet of thousands. Ships appeared around his vessels, not threatening, not attacking, just present. A silent statement that said, "You are outnumbered. You have lost." On the Zenthari homeworld, people poured into the streets, not to protest, not to riot, just to look up at the sky and see the ships of species their ancestors had thought extinct, to see living proof that the architect records were true. The High Council of the Concordat tried to maintain order, but it was impossible. Junior species began declaring independence. The Silicon Collective had already left. Now the Hive Mothers announced they were withdrawing. The Eternal Court dissolved into civil war as factions fought over whether to accept the truth or deny it. Within a week, the Concordat existed in name only. On the Prometheus Unbound, Captain Vasquez received a communication from one of the newly arrived ships. The being on the screen was beautiful, with crystalline skin that refracted light into rainbows. It spoke through a translation device in a voice like music. "I am Speaker Velinor of the Luminar. We were the first species the architects uplifted 3 million years ago. We have waited in the shadows for 12,000 years, hoping someone would be brave enough to tell the truth. You have done what we could not. You have changed the galaxy. For this, humanity will always have our friendship." Vasquez felt tears on her cheeks. "We just did what was right." "That is why you succeeded where others failed," Velinor said. "The architects believed that courage and curiosity were the most important traits in a species. They would have been proud of you." Across the galaxy, a new order began to emerge. The Founders' fleet stood down, their commanders realizing that military force could not stop what was happening. Some of the Founders accepted the changes with grace. Others retreated to their home systems, bitter and angry. But none could deny that the old Concordat was finished. Representatives from every species met on a neutral world to negotiate the new galactic government. This time, there would be no founding species with special privileges. No forbidden zones, no secrets. Every species would have an equal voice. The negotiations took 3 months. They were messy, complicated, and sometimes broke down completely. But humans had a talent for diplomacy, for finding compromises that everyone could accept. Ambassador Martinez worked day and night, building coalitions, mediating disputes, and slowly, painfully, creating something new. When the new Concordat Charter was finally signed, it bore the principles the architects had believed in: equality, freedom of information, the right of all species to develop without interference, but with access to help when needed, and most importantly, transparency. No more lies, no more hidden history. Inquisitor Thelgzara was offered a position as one of the first judges of the new Galactic Court. She accepted, knowing that someone needed to ensure justice was served fairly. Many of her fellow Zenthari called her a traitor, but just as many called her a hero. She had chosen truth over comfort, justice over loyalty. History would remember her kindly. Dr. Chen became the director of the Architect Studies Institute, a new organization dedicated to exploring and preserving architect knowledge. He spent the rest of his life translating their records, learning their secrets, and teaching new generations about the civilization that had believed in uplifting others rather than dominating them. Fleet Admiral Kreshitar faced trial for attempting to start a civil war. He was found guilty and sentenced to exile in a remote system. In his final statement, he said something that surprised everyone. "I still believe the Founders made the right choice 12,000 years ago, but I also believe we should have told the truth about it. Lies always catch up with you eventually. The humans taught us that." Captain Elena Vasquez was offered promotion, rewards, political positions. She turned them all down. "I'm a ship captain," she said simply. "Give me a ship and a mission, and I'll be happy." The new Concordat gave her the Prometheus Unbound and a mission: explore the forbidden zones, activate the architect facilities, and help bring the lost species home. It would take decades, maybe centuries, but Vasquez had time. 2 years after the crisis began, she stood on the bridge of her ship, preparing to transit through another architect gateway. Dr. Chen was beside her, eager to see what they would find. The crew was ready, experienced now, confident in their ability to handle whatever came next. "Ready, Captain?" Chen asked. Vasquez smiled. She looked at the gateway opening before them, a doorway to mysteries and wonders. This was what humanity did best. They asked questions. They sought truth. They went where others were afraid to go. "Ready," she said. "Take us through." The Prometheus Unbound jumped into the gateway, racing toward the next discovery. Behind them, the galaxy was changing. The old order was gone. Something new and better was being built. It would not be perfect. There would be struggles and setbacks and moments when everyone questioned whether they had made the right choice. But it would be built on truth. And that made all the difference. In the Architect archives buried deep in data that would take generations to fully translate, there was a message. The last message the architects had left before they died. Dr. Chen would find it years later, and when he did, he would understand why the architects had prepared so carefully for their own end. The message said, "To whoever finds this, we know we will not survive. We accept this, but we believe that someday a species will emerge with the courage to tell the truth and the strength to build something better. We leave these archives for them. We leave our knowledge, our history, our hopes. Build well, build justly, and remember us not for how we died, but for what we believed. That all thinking beings deserve the chance to reach their potential. That knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. That the measure of a civilization is not in what it builds, but in what truths it dares to face. Be worthy of the galaxy we leave you. Be better than those who destroyed us. And above all, never stop asking questions. Never stop seeking truth. That is the path to wisdom. That is the path to greatness. That is the legacy we leave you." Humanity had found that message, and in finding it, they had fulfilled the architect's last hope.